Welcome to Book Time with Ryan. I am Ryan, and today I'll be talking about Jame Clavell's Shōgun. They say Shōgun in the TV show. I love this cover. This is just over 1,300 pages. The binding has taken a beating while I've read this over the last few weeks. But I don't usually like the media tie-ins, but I just love this cover so much. And I could do without the FX Hulu fake sticker, but that's okay. I'm willing to overlook it because this is just an awesome book. I'm doing this video in the hot tub because in the book, baths are very important. But, my hair is... Maybe I shouldn't have gone underwater. So I'm going to try to describe the book and what happens a little bit. I will say that with 1,300 pages, that's going to be difficult. But I'll try. So this took me about 3 weeks. I read the book because I watch the show on FX or Hulu, and it is an awesome show. And I've recommended it to everyone that I know, including you. I'm going to recommend it to you too. I was probably 4 episodes in and I said, you know what, I just need to read this. And it took me a week or two to catch up to the show, which is really like reading 900 pages. So, and I'm a slow reader. But what I'm not going to do is compare the book to the show because the show's not over. I think it's going to be 9 episodes. And really, when you read some of the 1,300 pages, it's going to be hard to go almost like scene by scene with something that's going to be over 10 weeks because of 10 episodes. All right, so the book starts, we're looking at 1600. This is the time of, I think, Philip II in Spain. This is after the Spanish Armada was defeated in England, and we're looking at a time period where Queen Elizabeth has been on the throne for I think a little less than 20 years in England. When I started the book, I thought that the main character that this story was about was an English pilot being somebody who pilots a ship, navigates for them, named John Blackthorne. He is piloting a Dutch ship called the Erasmus, and they've basically been sent out to harass, they're almost like privateers, harass Spanish and especially Spanish, but Spanish and Portuguese shipping and religious settlements, because this is also a time of conflict between the Catholic Church and Protestants. The Netherlands and England are Protestant. The Spanish Empire is Catholic. So it's 1600, and we're starting off with the Erasmus is in a lot of trouble. It started out in a group of 5 ships. It's the last one of its crew. It has a fraction of the crew left. I think maybe less than 20 out of 100 something. And they're dealing with scurvy, and they've been lost. They're looking for land, really, but they think they're going towards Japan, or the Japans. And really the pilot, John Blackthorne, is trying to, in his mind, he wants to circumnavigate the world and be the first English sailor to do that. They're close to death, and they end up in Japan, and they are taken by the local Japanese authorities. So that's how one part of the book starts. We're also looking at a feudal, almost civil war. It's not quite civil war yet, but there's the Japanese islands are split between a number of different lords, and the main leader, who was essentially a shogun, but he couldn't be a shogun because he wasn't born in the right caste. He is dying, and they've decided to split up the realm and have it administered by a council of regents until the heir is old enough to take over. Because I think he's 7 years old maybe at this point. So they're waiting for him to be old enough to take over. And that's the main gist of what this is. You have some really cool characters. The main strongman that you could kind of consider the good guys is Toranaga, Lord Toranaga, or Toranaga-sama. We have John Blackthorne, who is known as Anjin, or Anjin-san, which is Japanese for pilot. And one of my favorite characters, Mariko. I have Yabu, or Yabu-sama, or Yabu-san. And he is one of the lesser lords that are under the area that Toranaga controls. On the other side of it, kind of the antagonist is Lord Ishido. And he is trying to get the Council of Regents to indict basically Toranaga and then have him kill himself. There's a lot of honor killings. There's a lot of suicide in this book, done honorably, and really the value of life is pretty low. But it's a cultural thing. I will say that this is mentioned in the book, and it's also in the trailers for the show, but there's this, well, I think it was the first trailer for the show. It talks about 3 hearts. There's a heart that you wear that the world sees. There's a heart that you give to your friends. And then there's a heart that no one knows but yourself. You have 3 hearts. Man has 3 hearts. And that's really important to remember through 1,300 pages of this book, because I think one of the things that the book does really well that you don't get to experience in the show, because I think it would be nearly impossible, is there's one thing the characters say, there's another thing the characters do, and there's another thing the characters think, and they don't always align. So what we're looking at is Toranaga trying to figure out how to survive and protect the heir and basically take control of the Council of Regents. There is another thing going on here too. I said there is a kind of a battle between Protestants and Catholics. In Japan, religion was basically administered by the Catholic Church, and even within the Catholic Church, there's a battle between the Franciscans and the Jesuits. And by this time, the Jesuits are really kind of taking over. This is not just in Japan. This is happening all over. The Great River book I read, I've done a review for, that mentions some of the play between the missions of the Franciscan monks, or monks, fathers, and padres, and the Jesuits moving in, and how the influence of those different sects of Catholicism shifted in the holdings of the Spanish Empire, which was in decline. It's really hard to recount how, but the Anjin, or John Blackthorne, he becomes a valuable person to the kind of the warring factions, because he has advanced knowledge of modern European warfare, and especially at sea. And Japan really does not have much of a sea presence, especially off the coast, where Europe is really dominating the high seas. So they want to learn from him for that. And he wants to make it clear that he is not Catholic, but he is Christian. And that is hard for some in Japan to understand, because really all they know is Catholicism. That is Christianity to them, and they're not aware of these other countries. Especially the fact that the Netherlands, which is part of the Spanish Empire, is essentially revolting, but they've been revolting for years. and the English are at war with the Spanish. There's a lot of transition in the world. You basically have 1,300 pages of shifting alliances and planning for a war. And the thing that's good to remember is that nothing's final. Kind of karma is what they say in the book, really, that there's karma and there's always time for something to happen. Because at the end of the day, if somebody says the order is you need to kill yourself, and they're in a position to give that order, then somebody like Toranaga would do it. But he's trying to hold off. There's a lot of rules and customs where it's kind of heading that direction, but it's not immediate. Where if it was in Europe, it would just happen without question. You also get to see how cleanliness is very different in Japan. Very clean cities, very hierarchical or caste systems at this point, but really married to cleanliness. And the sailors that come from the Erasmus are not clean at all. They're lice-infected, they have scurvy, they're disgusting, they're smelly, they never get showers, they never get baths, and they are plopped into a culture where bathing is important. That's why I'm doing it from a hot tub today. So what you end up having is planning over 1,300 pages on who's going to do what, who's going to lead different parts of the army that Toranaga has gathered. There's also this fear that the Christian, I think the daimos, the lords that are over Christian lands that have been converted are going to team up against Toranaga and help Ishido. So it's really how you turn them against each other. How do you have different fiefdoms turn on Ishido so they can at least be split up enough that Toranaga can take over. And there's this idea that Toranaga is really the most faithful servant and protector of what is the heir, the young boy that's going to become the next major leader for the realm. There are a lot of female characters that are important. Ochiba, Mariko is the most important, I think. I don't have the book in my hand, so it's going to be very easy to forget names, but there are a lot of characters who have to learn to appreciate John Blackthorne, and there's so much that John Blackthorne learns about Japan, and he becomes more and more Japanese. He becomes a samurai. He becomes kind of a political leadership figure called a Hatamoto, and for Toranaga, and he's important to Toranaga, but he's also important to Ishido because they do understand that he knows navigation, he knows shipbuilding, he knows what the rest of the world is dealing with. There's the idea that his countrymen are going to be coming soon to try to establish trade with Japan, and the Japanese want to be prepared for that because they are not at all prepared for anything happening from the water, really. On land, yes, but even on land, the way they've battled is really samurai to samurai, sword to sword, person to person, and not kind of the modern warfare of cannons or muskets and longer range fighting where you just are killing from afar and you don't see face to face who you're shooting at or killing at the time. But they also understand that there's a need to advance, a need to learn that kind of warfare to protect themselves in the future and possibly to take over China and Korea and then move west into other lands. The entire 1,300 pages is really you learning about Toranaga. There's a lot to learn. Seeing John Blackthorne develop into somebody who is more Japanese than English, or the Japanese think of him as barbarian, and He's still very different from them, but he earns a lot of respect, and people understand that he's kind, different, but fair in a different way, different sense of honor, and important politically and militarily for different parts of the Japanese leadership. You see how different characters are used by leadership. You see how characters say one thing and do another, or say one thing, think another, and how that's pretty universal, which is really interesting to see in the book, because they'll say one thing and you're like, okay, and then you get to the next paragraph and they're really thinking the exact opposite. And you also see it from every angle. So you see the character they're talking to, who responded with certain things, also thinking a certain way. And so there's a lot of not only double speak, I think, but also it's kind of built into the system, into the culture of not only understanding that somebody's saying something to you, but there's some kind of other meaning, some kind of underlying message that somebody outside of that culture wouldn't understand, wouldn't pick up on. Which is part of why Anjin, or John Blackthorne, has trouble at the beginning and throughout the book, really, is I think it's a more direct, less layer upon layer of messaging where Blackthorne's from, but he's got to adapt and learn the longer he's in Japan. And by the end of it, I think I was kind of waiting for this big war. And the end of it, you don't really get that. You get some little, you get killing. There's plenty of killing. But there's not this big battle scene. There are ninjas. And I cannot wait to see the episode in the show where the ninjas show up, because that's pretty cool and violent. And from my outside Western point of view, I think of like a samurai and ninja being like kind of this, not the same thing, but equally cool, maybe? And equally cool. That's pretty Western. It's very clear in the book that samurai are motivated by honor and really governed by honor and looked down on, and they're also the kind of the ruling class. They look down on ninja because they kill with no honor, and they're usually working class people who learn and kill within their communities, basically for hire, so which they're against. I was really surprised the way it ended, because I think it drives home the three heart idea: one for the world, one for your friends, and one that you keep hidden. And I guess it wasn't necessarily surprising, but it was changed feelings, I think, for different characters. And you will see characters that you really like that die, and you'll see characters that you don't like live too long. But it was great. It was a great book. It's a great show. I would totally recommend it. This is the longest book, just over 1,300 pages, that I've ever read. So that's big for me. I love the copy that I have, and I can't wait to see the rest of the show and kind of experience some of the major moments, just see how it's done on the small screen. So Jame Clavell's Shōgun. One of the interesting things too is that Jame Clavell spent time in a POW camp in Japan after being captured in, I think, Singapore. So I do wonder how that informs his writing. He's dead. That was a long time ago. This book's from, I think, 75 maybe. So it's older than me. But I would be interested to kind of hear from people that really know Japanese culture, and especially like samurai, 1600s, feudal Japan, to understand how accurate the book is, because I felt like it was, but I also am basing it off of nothing. And he has other books too that I'm going to look into. They're not as long as this one, I don't think, but they deal with different time periods. So 1600s Japan, I've checked that box. And maybe go out and get Silence, which is a movie that I've watched and loved, and eventually I'm going to read that book too, which kind of deals with the same time period in Japan. So Shōgun, or Shōgun, Jame Clavell, 5 stars, 100% recommend it to anybody. Give yourself some time to read it. Work out your wrists, because you will experience some wrist fatigue holding up a giant thick book for weeks to read it, but it's really well done. Thanks for being here today. Remember to get a bath and stay clean. Have a good one. Bye. I'm back on land, out of the water. And I had to add, because when I was editing this video, I realized I never said how much I wanted to be a samurai. Now, there's like samurai voices that I want to do, but I feel like it would be racist, so I don't do it. And there are so many cool things about samurai and this time period, but I think I would like to be a samurai without having to deal with any of the honor or the suicide or the hierarchy. Like, it's almost like I would like to have a cool samurai sword and the armor, and that's it. So I don't really think that's being a samurai, but I just thought it was so cool. And then the more you read, there's so much hardship involved in this time period, and it is difficult to be samurai. So I maybe shouldn't do that. I also forgot to say, because I told my daughter before I went out to film in the hot tub that I was going to film, and she said, don't forget at the end to say, please like and subscribe. So, on behalf of Noelia and myself, I guess, please like and subscribe. Have a good one. Bye.